Hello and welcome to a video where I'll be taking you through the Cygnus Trace module. So let's first of all load the Trace module and take a look through the various options. So we right mouse click on our input data and select Trace. Okay, so here we can see across the top of the Trace module we have a number of buttons. We have Traceable, which is just the master button to turn the options or the data set off or on. So if I click that button, as you can see, it turns all of the options off. Click that button again and all data sets are now turned on. The next button is matching level, and it's set to practical, which is the only option in the trace module. There are other options in the suppress module, but in the trace module it's just set to practical, which is basically a reasonable level of matching rather than being an overkill or an underkill as you get in other modules. The third button is the forename matching level, and at the moment by default we have it set to strict. But if I right mouse click, you can see there are three other options rather. You have loose, moderate, strict and ultra strict, and this really depends on one, the data that you're importing, and secondly your own preference. Strict is the default, as I mentioned, and that means that the matching will take into account things like the title and elements of the forename rather than being loose, which might just be initials versus forename or even no initial versus forename, and ultra strict of course being almost an exact match, so the forename and initials would need to be almost identical in order for those to match. There's more information about this in the Trace user guide. Okay, on the three files that we have, they are Experian contacts, NCOA from Royal Mail, which is the National Change of Address file, and we have gas reactive from the red group. Now you can turn them off if you want them off. Obviously the default is to have them all set to on, but let's say for example you wanted to turn Experian contacts off, so all you do is click on it to release the button. Likewise, if you want to turn two off, obviously click on the other one that you want to turn off. And to put them back on again, obviously just click them again. Okay, moving down, we have the charging bias. The default again is set to factory, which is the Cygnus default setting, and that just means it'll work in a cheapest royalty rate first order. So the cheaper royalty rate will be at the top of the order and the higher royalty rate at the bottom. There are a number of other options. One worth touching on is specific. So if I choose that, you can see under my specific priority list, I have something selected called Client A. This means that obviously our Client A has requested they want to run their trace processing in a specific order. So for example, maybe Royal Mail NCOA first, followed by gas reactive and then Experian, or the other way around, whichever your client has agreed to. And setting this up is done via the suppression prices option under master settings. So again, there is more information about that in the Trace user guide. Okay, let's flip it back to our default factory setting. We have an option here for blocking overseas tracing. So if one of the moves has been to an overseas address, then you have the option of either adding that overseas address, or as you can see from the checkbox being switched on, in our case we will block any overseas addresses from being appended to the data. We also have an option for a quick dupe, which is, as it says, is a quick dedupe on the data before it goes into the trace processing, which matches at whatever level you've chosen. So in our case, practical rather than overkill, and forename level set to strict. It's a fast and slightly cruder dedupe than we have in the other options available within Cygnus, which are of course dedupe itself and the purge module, but it is there as an option for you to choose to use if you wish to. Okay, because home mover new address appending can only be used for marketing purposes, we have added a checkbox onto the form, which does have to be checked before you're enabled or able to run the trace process. So if I try and run that now, it will come back and say the conditions for using this process have not been verified, so it cannot run. However, if I check that box to confirm that it's for marketing purposes only, I can now run that process. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, so it's now progressing through the matching routines. We have 5,000 records going in, and down the bottom you can see the counter. We have 4,600 and whatever left, matching against just over 80 million home mover records. Progress running at currently 12-13%, and our hits so far amount to 10. You'll notice that we also display the current postcode being matched. Now the trace module sorts the input data by postcode before it does any of the matching, just makes it more efficient. The Experian Contacts, Gas Reactive and NCOA datasets are all pre-sorted and pre-indexed by postcode to make the matching routines much more efficient. Okay, so let's monitor that as it goes through the matching process. Okay, so we'll jump in at the end now, and as you can see, we're now 95% of our way through the process. We've around about 106 matches, 108 now, and there's just 100 records from our input file left to match. Okay, and we're up to WF postcodes now, WN. Okay, that's about to finish. And there we are. Okay, so what we can do now is go and have a look at the results. First of all, if we look at the process flow, we can see we have 3 output files. We have 4,885 records in situ, which means that they haven't matched against any of the records on the home mover files. And we have 115 records that have matched and therefore have a new address. And because we had the block overseas tracing checkbox on, we didn't have any records that matched or at least appended an overseas address. So into the results tab. First thing we can do is have a look at some of the matches. So click on that button and that loads the matches review form. And as we can see, we have on the right hand side, we have our record from the input file, 60 Riverside Drive, Aberdeen. And on the left hand side, we have the record from Experian Absolute Contacts, which is the one that is the old address. And below the input record, we have the new address. So this person has moved from 60 Riverside Drive, Aberdeen, to Rathmore House in Dollar, Clackmannanshire. And we can flick through a few more just to make sure that we're happy with the matching of these records. And if we click on this button, what it does, it takes us to the next suppression category. So at the moment we're on Absolute Contacts. If I check that button, it takes us to Gas Reactive. We can have a look at those. Gas Reactive also has occupier information. We didn't choose that, but we have that option available if we wish to use it. And now we've jumped to NCOA update. As you can see again, we have our input record, the record on NCOA database itself, and for Royal Mail NCOA, we mask the new address until you've run it through the checkout process. So that's why you can't see the actual address in the bottom window. Okay, this button here, if you want to use that, you can jump to any of the individual files themselves. So we could jump back to Experian Contacts and look again at those matches. So a few options in terms of reviewing the match records during that process. Okay, so let's close that. Now let's have a quick look at the report. Just expand that a little bit. Okay, and what we have here is the 3 input data sets, NCOA update, Experian Contact and Gas Reactive. We have the quantities in each of those files, so 23 million for NCOA, 7 million for Experian Contacts and 21 million for Gas Reactive. And on the right hand side we have the quantity of matches, so 43 against NCOA, 17 against Experian and 55 against Gas Reactive. And if we make our way through the report, we have the priority here, the hierarchy. So NCOA update was the top one and Gas Reactive at the bottom. Then we have a few matches that again you can go and review them just to make sure you're happy with the matching that's taken place. And it's worth noting at this stage that this is the record, the old address record on the database, not the new one. So it just shows the match and not the new address. Okay, finally, the last page of the report shows you a costing analysis. So we have our matches there against NCOA, the rate and the total cost for that particular file. Okay, and it repeats it for each of the other files. Okay, and of course you can export that report as a PDF, which you can then obviously email or do with as you wish. Okay, so that's the Trace module. If you have any questions, please contact me on mark.dobson@thesoftwarebureau.com. Many thanks for watching.